We've been talking about how the powers that be seem determined to have us persuade us that a poorer, colder, hungrier life is all we deserve and for the greater good. To continue with that line of chat, I'm joined now by Jacob Reynolds from MCC Brussels, a body dedicated to understanding the issues of our time. Thanks for coming in, Jacob.
Yeah, cheers.
Agenda 21, I've been reading about it, we're aware of it. What is it and how would you present it to the general populace?
Yeah, well, I mean, you discussed it kind of quite, in some ways, quite nicely in your introduction and focused on the ways in which it's a kind of a vision, if you like, of what the future might look like if we were to kind of subscribe to the environmental and kind of sustainable goals that our elites are kind of so enamoured with. I think I'd make one slight distinction, though, which is that I think people who are against kind of Agenda 21 and the proponents kind of make a mistake in assuming that these kind of documents are really what set the wheels in motion of things. Actually, what they do is they reflect much broader assumptions of all of our elites. So if you think about whether it's kind of Khan or Sunak or anyone, they all sign up implicitly or explicitly to this idea that human beings are a problem, that human beings are kind of a plague on the planet. And in a way, all these documents, or the WEF or Agenda 21 or the kind of group of mayors that we were discussing earlier, like, they reflect these broad assumptions that elites have about human beings. And so it's no surprise that we see what to many people would sound like kind of shocking things about how our lives are going to be poorer, less interesting, colder, kind of no holidays and all the rest of it. Because those assumptions are really deeply embedded in our elites. And as you were talking about earlier, the fact that people are beginning to challenge these is what's really important.
Are there grounds for that? You know, Chris talked earlier about how the whole idea that we are responsible for what's happening with climate is a theory without any scientific consensus that means anything. Is there a justification for these so-called elites like Khan and the rest of them, and like Sunak and Klaus Schwab? Do they have any kind of justification for saying that we are a blight on the planet that has to be in some way wound back?
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing I think about this is that it doesn't actually matter in a way what the science would or wouldn't say about kind of humans' impact on the planet, because that's not what drives these people. They don't care if the science came back in a different way; it wouldn't matter to their worldview.
They have to have a reason, surely.
Yeah. Well, and their reason is these assumptions that they have, this ideology that ever since kind of a turn against the things that make human beings great. And that's what kind of informs all of their thinking. And so they commission research on the basis that if it doesn't come back with the right result, that human beings are kind of causing this or that problem or are responsible for X, Y, and Z. That's their worldview, and so they commission the stuff to get that result.
Something I find particularly, I suppose what I find most troubling is this idea of, well, you call it stakeholder capitalism or public-private partnership, this discernible move that there is to take the decision-making, the direction-setting away from us, away from people who can vote, people like us who have to live with the consequences. You know, they want to elevate it to a point where it's handed down from on high. Am I interpreting that properly?
Well, I mean, some people call this kind of nicely, I think, the kind of NGO industrial complex, this like sense that there is this web of organisations and governments that don't necessarily kind of collude in an obvious sense of the term, but they share all of the same politics, basically. And the governments go out, and there's millions of examples. Your article is, I think, got some of them in, and we saw it with regards to the so-called evidence supporting ULEZ on people, the effect it would have on people's health, is that governments commission research that gives them the results they're looking for. They go out, they have their favourite scientists, so they know that if they chuck them a few £100,000 for a research project, they will come back with a favourable result. And so we can easily make a mistake in saying, oh yeah, it's these NGOs that are the problem. But really we have to look at our politicians.
Julie, we talk, don't we, about, you know, the people will rise and there will come a point that the people won't take this any longer. Do you think they will? Do you think there is a foreseeable breaking point where the people will say, you have got to be joking?
I think it's almost, it reminds me of Les Miserables. I don't think we're hungry enough yet. I don't think we're starving enough yet. I think when we've really had enough is when you can't eat, when you aren't allowed to heat your home, when you're not allowed to visit your very sick, dying child in that awful, crumbling concrete hospital that's falling apart. I think that's when it will break. But I think, again, when will that be and how will it happen?
Chris, I see you nodding.
Well, I was going to say, not enough blackouts yet, you see. I mean, I always say that if you have a really cold winter we get high pressure that sits in January, and it's freezing cold for a month, and the wind stops and everything, and there's blackouts, and quite frankly, thousands of old people will die. People will probably then start to sort of wake up that everything that's been proposed is a disaster, an insane disaster.
Jacob, do you think we are getting to that point that so far it's been just words, but when it becomes something that people experience and feel?
Yeah,
and in their homes.
Well, yeah, we're seeing this with you. Those people are seeing the effect that these kind of net zero assumptions are having on their lives. Also, we at MCC Brussels are kicking off a big project looking at the effect this is having on farming. So you've talked a lot on your show, I know, about the kind of influence of what's happening to farmers right across Europe. We've been going out, and me and my colleagues have been going out speaking to farmers across Europe, and that's one place where it really is having an impact. And you see very quickly that people push back, and it's our job, kind of people with the platform, especially like on this show, to highlight those instances where people are pushing back, because that's ultimately the only way that you can kind of overturn these assumptions.
Well, you've had sorry.
Go on.
I was going to say you've had 25 years of this virtue signalling. People, it's an easy virtue signal. Oh, yes, we're all in favour of saving the planet. And you were right in your monologue. You talked about the way they sort of frame it, sustainability. You know, nobody wants to drown kittens. And so there's been 25 years of this virtue signalling, and everybody is sort of an environmentalist. Everybody is a environmentalist, in fact. Nobody wants dirty air and whatever. But when you start to say people, when they start to realise, oh, you mean my steak? Oh, you mean my motor car? Oh, you mean my gas boil? They'll start to think, oh, I didn't actually sign up for this malarkey. I mean, this is not on. And this is where you will start, I think, to see a pushback. And already ULEZ is a small pushback. You know, they say, is it 1 in 6 old cars are being pushed off the road? And people are angry just with this one measure. Wait till they really start.
So I suppose what you're saying is it is getting real now, and whether people believe that there's justification in winding back our way of life or not is about to be revealed when it actually touches people's dinner plates and their pantries and their cars.
Yes.
And this is in a way where you see the kind of ideology that drives it, because it would be that you could imagine a transition to kind of less polluting fuels that was all about nuclear power, kind of massive electrification. You can imagine a kind of positive alternative. But the fact that they're not interested in nuclear power, that they won't kind of put major investments in these kind of things, tells you that really what drives this is not a kind of, oh, we would just want to live in a slightly more sustainable way. Really, they have a very, very different view about human beings should live. One that I think, as you say, when people realise what this means for them in practice, they won't accept.